Hey everybody, welcome to the Tiny Studio. Welcome to Let's Crochet and Chat. And what are we going to be talking about today while we crochet? We are going to be discussing the Granny Square Afghan that I may be working on in this episode. So let's just get to it. All right, so as you know, I keep multiple projects going on here in the Tiny Studio, but I have one completed granny Afghan that I'm currently working on. I think I showed you that Afghan where I'm currently creating some crochet flowers to go on top of it. It would be like a 3D type of thing on the Afghan. I also have other projects, Granny Square Afghans that I'm working on. And you know, they're all in different stages, but there are two in particular that probably only need maybe about 20 to 30 more rows and they will be done. So I like to keep my Afghan projects flowing and continuous. So I'm going to be probably starting a new Afghan with, well, I'll just let you see. Okay, so this is the Afghan that I'm working on right now. This is she, and I haven't named my Afghans. Maybe I should do that, but this is one of my favorites, and she, as you probably already know, or if not, if this is your first time hanging out with me in the Tiny Studio, I use yarn from, or leftover yarn from other projects in my Granny Square Afghans. So she has, you know, multiple leftover yarn in her. And one of the reasons why I love this particular project is because of the yarn that's used in it. Is excuse me, because of the yarn that's used in this particular project. And what is that yarn? It's this beautiful blue yarn right here. You see that blue yarn and that beautiful yarn right here, which is, I think is maybe turquoise and light green and a little blue in it. It's like an ombre. These two yarns that you see right here and right here, this is the yarn, or the leftover yarn, from the Afghan that I made my grandmother, which was, I have to say, it's a king size Afghan, and the colors are blue, gray, and black. And as a matter of fact, this is the leftover black from my grandmother's Afghan. So this is the black, and then there is some of the ombre that was in her blanket, and I used the ombre as the border. And the border for my grandmother's Afghan has a beautiful ruffled border, and I used this ombre for her border. And then here is the blue that I used in her Afghan. So that's why this Afghan is very special to me, because it holds three of the yarns that I used to crochet my grandmother's Afghan. Now, my grandmother is a designer, and she is just a fantastic clothing designer, and she designs women's fashions. She has designed wedding gowns for clients. She designed my wedding gown, and she is basically the person that I would go to when I wanted to have beautiful custom design outfits in my wardrobe. She's just a really loving person, a giving person, a compassionate Black woman, and a very strong, kind Black woman, and I love her and I honor her, and I am grateful to her. And I'm not a sewer. You know, I could have been downstairs with her in her tiny studio, watching her sew, and I've watched her sew before, but I was never really interested. And I took a sewing class in middle school, so I know the basics of sewing, but I've never been interested until recently, where I've been once again bitten by that bug. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not thinking, I'm actually getting ready to start a quilt. I just haven't got the courage up yet. But it's on my mind to begin quilting. So I got all of that from my grandmother and my mom. And I wanted to make something for her. And my Afghan was my gift to her. And it was just such a wonderful process for me to create that Afghan for her. And as I said before in a previous video, when I went to visit her back in 2019, and I actually used that Afghan. And she lives in Detroit, Michigan. That's my hometown. And it was very cold those 3 days that we were in Detroit. So to snuggle up under an Afghan that I designed and crocheted was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it felt so good. And it was so warm, you know. As a matter of fact, that's all I really needed was that Afghan, because it was so warm. And it sits on the couch in my grandmother's blue room. And she has a blue room, you know, with a blue couch, and the room is painted blue, and it's just an exciting place to be in, because that's her favorite color, and that's my mom's favorite color. So that's why the Afghan was blue and gray and black, and it fit the room perfectly, especially with that ombre ruffle. It just made everything, just made the couch stand out. And it just, you know, it's laid across the couch over the top like a, you know, cool throw. Just wonderful. And I get so excited when I walk into her home and I see my throw there. What a feeling. So that's why this Afghan here is so special to me, because it has the remains of my grandmother's Afghan in here. But as I said, I have one completed Afghan, Granny Square Afghan, and then I have 2 more that's on their way to being completed. Let me drink some of this hot lemon water. Excuse me. So, of course, I'm saying to myself, well, I need to start another project and have one just coming up the pike in the next coming weeks. So I pulled out 2 granny squares that I crocheted perhaps sometime last year. I'm going to show them to you now. Okay, so what I'm going to first show you is one of the very first granny squares that I ever made, and this is she right now. One of the first granny squares I ever made, and this is supposed to be it's supposed to be a sunburst granny square. But as you can see, not exactly. This is not really a sunburst granny square. And in fact, she's supposed to be, but she's not. And one thing that I learned about granny squares is that even I'm a free form crocheter, but when you're talking about a granny square, well, with freeform crochet, it gives you leeway to be able to do what you want. But when it comes to creating a granny square, you're kind of tethered to math. And I say that because when you're making a square, you already know that there are 4 corners. However, in making the sunbursts and certain type of granny squares, you have to stick to the mathematical formula of your granny square. So you already know that granny clusters are made of 3 double crochets. You know that when you create a corner in your granny square, it's 1 set of granny clusters, then it's a chain 2, and then it's your second set of granny square clusters, and then you move on. However, you have to make sure that you are sticking to the pattern if you are making like I was supposedly making, this sunburst here. And as you see, the errors that I made in this sunburst, there are many, but the math is off. The math is off. And in fact, some of the clusters are off in this granny square. But what I really liked about this granny square is the colors of pink and white. That's what I really liked about it. And even though there are some things wrong with this granny square, that doesn't mean that I can't create a granny afghan out of this imperfection. In fact, I believe that it may create, or I may be able to create something really beautiful out of this imperfect or irregular granny square. And I learned this from being on social media and talking to a crocheter, and I kept, I was feeling bad about my granny square mishap. And I had made a bunch of these granny squares, and I was so frustrated that I threw one away and I tried to unravel the other. And one of the people in my crochet group suggested that I keep the wonky granny squares and just incorporate them into a project. And I thought about that. And instead of throwing the wonky looking granny squares that I had, the remaining ones, I decided that I would just do just that. Create a granny afghan with them. So here's one option. The second option is this. Which is another granny square. And there are some things wrong with her. And for what I can see, one of the things wrong with this beautiful granny square is one of the clusters is off. I don't know if you can see it, but one of the clusters in this granny square is off. So the rest of her is fine. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to repair that cluster, which means I'm going to get my yarn needle, and I'm going to repair that cluster if I can. And if I can't, I may just leave it alone and just create an afghan out of this square. And then maybe I'll add, you know, a crochet flower there to give it a 3D dimensional look. Who knows? But if you notice, I have a stitch marker there, and the reason why I have a stitch marker on this particular granny square is because I know that when I begin to create my granny afghan, which is probably why the stitch marker is there, because I more than likely chose this to make my next granny afghan, this square. But the reason why I have the stitch marker there is because the secret to making sure that your granny square afghan remains a square and not a oval or some other wonky shape, you have to turn your work. So each row or each second row that you create in your granny afghan, you have to make sure that you flip or change your work or turn your work. Because if you don't turn your work, what eventually happens is that the square begins to become wonky. It starts to turn into something that's not quite a square. See, here's your square, and then eventually when you don't turn your work, it starts to tilt like this, and it just continues and continues until, you know, you're saying to yourself, I don't like making granny afghans. I hate it. I can't do this. But the secret is turning your work. So how about I start on this today? How about I start working on creating an afghan out of this particular square? What do you think? I think that I will. I think I'm going to put this baby up, and I'll work on this one since it seems as if I've already marked it to begin to use anyway. And as you see, I have a lot of ends that I need to weave in, so I'll probably work on that as well. So what are you working on today? I'm going to pick out some yarn to go with this. And why don't you go and grab your work, or maybe you already have your work, but I'm going to grab some yarn for this and an appropriate hook, and I'll be right back. I'm just trying to think what colors I would like to incorporate in this yarn. In this afghan to begin with. So I think that I'm going to use some of this yarn here. I think this is the Impeccable yarn. And let me just drop that into my yarn bowl. And I'm guessing that as I move along, I may come up with a color scheme, but I never do. Let me see, I have one blanket, well, I have two granny afghans that I am currently have a color scheme for. And let me show you. The first one is what I've been calling the Crayola crayon. Afghan, Granny Afghan. And that's this one because it has various colors from, I was inspired by my old Crayola crayon box. Do you recall the Crayola crayons that came in, I think it was 64 crayons in the pack? That was, you was really up there, which is bougie if you had that pack of crayons. The 64 colors, yes. And then remember on the side of the box, or was it the back of the box, there was like a crayon sharpener there. So this is what I call the Crayola the Crayola crayon box Afghan, Granny Afghan, because it has all the colors in it. So this is a plain Afghan, except for Granny Afghan, except for the granny square in the middle, which was started out as a granny square. And then I just enlarged it. So I call this one the Crayola crayon Granny Afghan. So this is a planned color Afghan. And then the other planned Afghan I have is and you've seen this one before, I've worked on it. It's this orange and brown Afghan. I want to call it my pumpkin and chocolate, or sweet potato and chocolate. Or how about sweet potatoes? Oh, I know, I got it. This is my baked sweet potato Granny Afghan. Because you know how we do with the baked potatoes, right? Sweet potatoes, right? Gotta add a little brown sugar, a little cinnamon, and a little nutmeg. And that's what this is. And you see that? I just named her. Thank you for helping. All right, so this is my baked sweet potato Granny Square Afghan. And yes, she is a planned Granny Afghan. So as you can see, there are different colors of orange in her, and also different colors of brown featured in here. So I have two Afghans that are Granny Square Afghans that are actually planned pieces of work. So I'm thinking that I'm going to do the same for this one. But it just depends on the mood that I may be in as to what colors I'm going to start. So here I am in the corner. I'm getting ready. I'm chaining 3, as you can see. And then I'm getting ready to make my first double crochet. And the chain 3 is going to be act as the double crochet in this cluster. Okay, so I am underway. But what I notice is that I chain 1 before I moved into my first space. So that seems to be the pattern of this granny square. However, I'm not going to do that with these subsequent rows. I'm just going to continue making a cluster, and then I'll go into the space there and I'll just make my granny clusters instead of doing the chain 1 and then creating the granny cluster. And if you recall, a granny cluster is simply 3 double crochets in 1 stitch. So let's see how it goes. So I hope that you have been having a great week. What have you been up to? I have been busy with, this is graduation season, and my daughter recently graduated from high school, and I am so excited for her, and she is currently just taking a break. I don't blame her. And if you are a parent and you've been through graduation season, you know, which for a lot of us begins right after Easter, then you know that I was under a lot of stress. And even though I, created videos or content for my channel, off camera, I was busy encouraging my daughter and trying to get her to the finish line of her primary school education. And my baby girl's name is Constance, and I have 4 children, and she is the last of my children. And of course I was feeling some kind of way about it, but as Sonny and Cher said back in the day, the beat goes on, doesn't it? Or as Elton John says, this is what we call the circle of life. Everybody, you have children, or you decide to have children, and the children come and you enjoy them and you raise them, and you go through all those things that parents go through. And then one day you see or you reap the fruits of your labor. And the fruits of my labor are my 4 children. And they have turned out to be some really beautiful adults, which I have to say is a testament to my husband and I's parenting. And that's not to say that we were or are the perfect parents, or that we have this whole parenting thing figured out, because that's not true. But we were very intentional in how we wanted to raise our children. Very intentional. We raised them with a set of values, a set of religiosity. We had expectations. We believed in hard work. We believe in doing your best. We believe in standards of morality. And one of the things that we also believed in strongly is that our home or family structure was not democratic. Yeah. We believe that we, the parents, are the ultimate decision makers in the household, and the children are expected to follow those rules and guidelines that we provide for them or provided for them. Now, we would ask their opinion about certain things. On others, we did not ask, nor did we care. That does not mean that we were unfeeling towards them on certain subjects. What it means is that we felt a certain way and we were unmovable on that. And we had very high expectations for our children, but they were not high to the point that they were not unmeetable. And if you ask my children that question, if they believe that their parents' expectations were too high, they might say that they were. But when they failed to meet those expectations, we still treated them with love, respect, kindness, compassion, and with understanding. But it was always our goal to get our children ready for adulthood. And since we are Black or African American, it was always our goal to get our kids ready for what life would be for them as young African Americans living in America. And that's something about being a parent, especially a parent to a Black child. That's something that it's something that you have to do, especially if you're raising your children in the United States or in Europe. You have to prepare them for what the world is going to look like and be like for them. And I know I saw this segment that has been going around on social media with a white parent, mother, who decided she was going to sue a school district in Virginia where her son attended school, and she was going to sue them because she said they taught CRT, which is critical race theory. And she said that because the school taught critical race theory or talked about race, her son, who is Black, he has a Black father, her son came home with a whole different attitude. She said that her son started realizing and recognizing what race is. And he started having epiphanies about the way he was being treated. And he began to see that there were discrepancies in how he was being treated. And he said he was being treated. He noted to his mother that the reason why he was being treated certain ways is because he's Black. And so she's like, well, where did you hear that from? Or where did you get which doesn't make any sense, by the way. Where did you get the idea that you're being mistreated because you're Black? Oh, because you learned about this and that and the other in school, and you're putting two and two together. And what did she say? She said that something of the nature that her son never saw race before until he started learning about his culture in school. What kind of sense does that make? She said that her son's father is not in his life, which makes a whole lot of sense when you think about it. Because had his father been in his life, his father would have been able to provide him with the education that he needed, that would have been necessary for him as a young black boy. I think she said he was 13. How embarrassing for that kid. Your mom's going to school because you know how embarrassing. Just kind of dumb. And she looked dumb too. Of course, you know she was on Fox News. My son went to school, found out he was black, and came home and started saying, hey, now I know why I've been treated the way I've been treated, because I'm black. Now I understand. I'm trying to figure out. She wanted to raise her black son to not see race. Yet this country is all about race. You, Mom, were supposed to raise your black son with the understanding that since he is going to be a black man, and since he is a black boy, there are things that could go inherently wrong in his life. Racism is not eradicated here in America yet. Yes, we've had a black president, but racism still exists. We do not live in a post-racist society. So, ma'am, you should be hipping your son to the real deal about him being a black man or a black boy in this country. Okay? His history is that kids who look like him, who were half white, mulattoes, during slavery time, they were still regarded, no matter how white they looked, they were still regarded as slaves, as black, as Negro. They were still sold up the river. They were still viewed as property. And today, he will still be regarded as a black man. Now, he may receive a little bit more privilege than other African Americans because of the color of his skin, and because white people sometimes don't know when they're exactly looking at a black person. They don't know. However, at the end of the day, he's still a black man. And you need to protect your son by educating him. That's what you do. You educate them. And if you are uncomfortable with educating your child, then you find someone who will. Which is what the school system is for. But with all these new laws coming up about don't say gay, don't teach real history, all of that unnecessary stuff that's going on today, parents are going to have to stop being so closed-minded and become aware of what's really going on in the world. Because it's our job as parents to provide our kids with the best tools possible so that when they have to be out here without our supervision and guidance, so that when they are out here, they are able to function at the highest level, but yet also be in a position where they can protect themselves as well. We want our kids to prosper. We want our kids to grow. We want our kids to be successful. And as Black parents, we have to be the ones at the forefront of preparing our kids for the life that they'll probably have living here in westernized society, and in a society that's built on what? White supremacy. You got to protect your kids. And that mom over in Virginia, nope, she's not protecting her kid. She's trying to shield her kid. She wanted her kid to forever believe that they're white. I don't know why. That's dumb. Especially being that a few short years ago, Trayvon Martin was killed. Just a 15, 16-year-old kid coming home from the store. That's the reality of living here in America. That's the reality. And you can't shield your child from who they are. So that mom, she's falling down on the job. I don't know why, but she is. So, other than that, I feel really happy and confident. I'm not a grandmommy yet. I'm sure that day will come. But right now, I'm just enjoying my kids. And as my best friend said to me, she said, this is a new dawn for you, a new day. You're about to experience another side of being an adult. Post having babies and raising babies. You're about to experience a freedom. And I think I'm ready for it. I've been a mom since I was 19 years old, almost 20. 2 months short of my 20th birthday. And I am ready to experience that part of my life. I never had the opportunity to fully experience what it means to be an adult without children. That's why I kind of advise people not to have children so fast. Because when you have children too young, you really don't know who you are. You don't know what you stand for. You don't have any type of value system other than what you were raised with. And if your parents did not do a good job, then that's what you get. That's what you have. That's all you have. And you repeat the mistakes of your parents, because you really don't have the type of structure that you need to be your own type of parent. You're going off of what you've seen and what was done to you, and you use that as a roadmap to parent, and that's not necessarily a good thing. That's not really a good way to parent. And you know, when you're young, you're new to the world, you don't really have any experience, you don't even know who you are yet, but there you are, practicing on a child, doing all kind of damage. That's why I feel you should be a fully formed adult before you take on a role of being somebody's parent. That means you'll have a value system created out of your own life experience. You'll understand what it means to pay bills. You'll understand what it means to, support a family, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. You'll understand what those things mean. And sometimes that's what you need. Those are the things that you need as a parent to be able to give your children the best start in life. The healthiest start in life. So I just completed my first two rows of this new granny Afghan. And I've just flipped my work after two rows. I just started a new color, which is going to be this Simply Karen blue that I seem to have a lot of. Here's the thing, I'm really not a Simply Karen fan because, Simply Karen unravels a lot, and I dislike that a lot. But it's something about Simply Karen Super Soft or Soft that I love. And I was using, I think I was making a scarf a few years back. I created a scarf, or designed a scarf, and I probably, knowing me, I bought about 4 or 5 skeins of this Karen Simply Soft blue yarn. And I just love the color so much. I love the sheen. And more than likely, this is the yarn that was left over. And this is mainly basically what I was talking about before, about using the yarn in your stash, the leftover yarn from other projects. This was a skein that was intended for another project, and when I completed it, this is what was left over. So, and this yarn also shows up in a few of my other granny Afghans. And I just love the color. I love Caron Simply Soft. I love the yarn. Excuse me, but what I don't love is the splitting. I think at one point there was a rumor that Caron Simply Soft was going to be discontinued. You know how the internet works. You get into these Facebook groups, and people start talking, and they start talking and as if what they're saying is fact. And so that rumor came out that Caron Simply Soft was going to be discontinued. And when I saw it at Joann's, I picked up, I think, I picked up 2 or 3 more skeins. I picked up a pink, because that's, yes, Caron Simply Soft. I picked up a pink skein. I picked up a white skein. That's somewhere around here in my stash. And of course, this is before I knew about Hobby Lobby yarn. And I really didn't know anything about Hobby Lobby until one was built a few miles away from my home, and I decided to check it out. And now I am just in love with Hobby Lobby yarn. And I know there's some controversial things people are saying about Hobby Lobby. You know, I'm guessing it's started by a Christian fundamentalist group. I guess they are ultra conservative, and they have some questionable practices based on their religiosity. And I noticed a conversation about Hobby Lobby on Instagram. And, you know, had it been 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I might be on that same bandwagon. But at my age and knowledge right now, I understand that racism and all the things that go along with it is not centrally localized into one business. I now understand that racism and bigotry and all of those things, they are not the problem. Of one particular group of people in this country. Capitalism itself is a form of racism and always has been. The reason why people of my color are currently in this country without the ability to trace their roots 10 generations is because of capitalism. Racism and capitalism are intertwined. So I can't just look at Hobby Lobby as and evil because of some of their practices based on their political beliefs or religiosity. I can't do it. Because here's the thing. Most of these corporations that are really making money in America, they're all racist. They all practice some form of discrimination against people, against minorities. All of them do. It's very rare that you find a Fortune 500 company that's helmed by a black woman or by a black man. I mean, heck, this country has just elected a president who has a black vice president, female, a black woman as a vice president. First time that a woman has ever been that close to the White House in that way, that close to power, ever. So the fabric of this country is inherently, systemically racist. So having a vendetta against one particular company it's not going to make a difference. And that may sound pessimistic to many, but if you know, you know. If you know, you know. If you have the knowledge, you truly understand. So eventually I will get to the point where I will begin to spin my own yarn and dye my own yarn and deal with people who do the same, which I'm more than likely planning to do in the very near future, is buying my yarn from black yarn spinners and dyers, and in that way I will be ensuring that I am not buying into or helping to sustain a racist system. Because some of us want to point fingers at Hobby Lobby and other racist entities when we're still practicing and supporting other institutions in this country that are inherently anti-black. And if you're going to be gung-ho about not supporting Hobby Lobby, then you got to be gung-ho about a whole lot of other things too. You can't just be one. If you're gonna do the talking, you gotta do the walking. And it can't be just in one category because it make you feel good. Right? Because when you do things like that, you are a hypocrite. And nobody likes that word. Right? Right. Well, it's been about an hour. And let me show you what I have so far. That's really pretty. So remember, I started out with this, with just the granny square you see here, with the black border, and now I've completed 2 rows of purple And now I have, I'm almost finished with the first row of turquoise. Yep. And I flipped my work, and there's my stitch marker. So that will ensure that my square remains a square. So thank you so much for hanging out with me in the Tiny Studio today. I hope that you enjoyed the discussion. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Don't forget to like. And if you have comments about the conversation that we have had today in the Tiny Studio, please feel free to drop down into the comment section, and let's continue the conversation that we have had today here in the Tiny Studio. Oh yes, and I have my locks put away today in my beautiful slouchy hat. I've made 3 of these. I've made the purple. This is in purple, and I have made 2 black ones. However, as soon as I completed the one, my children came in and confiscated that. And then when I completed the second one, for the second black one, once again, a child came in, confiscated it, and now they're wearing it. Isn't that something? Don't make no sense. But I'm probably going to create another slouchy hat for my dreads, because I have a design plan that I'm probably going to use one of my granny squares for. Wouldn't that be something? That should be really interesting, turning a square, a granny square, into a slouchy hat, which is probably not as difficult as I'm thinking that it will be, because I'll be turning a square into a circle. But you know, I think it'll look cute, and I am really, really intrigued by that idea. Well, stay tuned and continue to join me in the Tiny Studio, and we'll see how that turns out, or how that idea develops. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget to press that thumbs up button. Have a great, great day, and I'll see you next time here in the Tiny Studio.